Good evening, book lovers. Welcome to another episode of Cath-Lit Live. I am your host, Amy Cattapan. You can find me everywhere on social media under my pen name, AJ Cattapan. And if you're new here, what you're going to find are interviews with Catholic authors who have new books releasing, or as is the case with tonight's guest, re-releasing. And if you haven't already checked out the Hello Prayer app, please use my link and you can get some free months with the premium version of Hallow. There's always a free version, but if you want to check out the premium version, you can check out hello.app/Cath-Lit-Live. I will put the link in the show notes. So go ahead. That helps to support our production of Cath-Lit Live here. Well, my guest tonight is an author I met through the Catholic Writers Guild. And well, actually, really we met because we were both fans of The Chosen first. And then we were discovered we were writers. And then we got to meet in person at a Catholic Writers Conference. And I'm excited to have her on tonight to talk about the re-release of her book, Single Truth, You Are More Than Your Relationship Status. This new version has a foreword now by Father Stephen Gadberry from Word on Fire, so you probably are familiar with him. Let me tell you a bit about Annie. Annie Harton is a proud alumna of St. Mary's College and the University of Notre Dame. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, author, and speaker. Her book, Single Truth, inspired her to start a business called You Are More. She specializes in helping singles and couples explore how they're more than their diagnoses, their pasts, their jobs, and their relationship status, while also reminding them that God is more than any problem they bring him. So please help me welcome to the show, Annie Harton. Hello, Annie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you on the show tonight. So we're going to be talking about your book, Single Truth, which actually came out a few years ago, but you've re-released it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it's about and maybe why you even decided to re-release it? I mentioned before you came on, I did mention it's got a foreword now by Father Stephen Gadberry. So that's one of the changes.
Yeah. Well, I wrote it 4 years ago when I came very close to getting married, and I realized how I was so excited to be a married marriage counselor as opposed to a single marriage counselor. And I found so much of my worth in my relationship status instead of just in who I was, because when that relationship ended, my kind of self-esteem plummeted and I was devastated and didn't feel as worthy as I did when I was in the relationship. So I wrote it after walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain and just experiencing the silence and the journey and feeling called to go on a year-long dating fast on my 30th birthday. So I released the book when I was 31. So I spent that whole year single, writing a book about singleness. And then 4 years later, I just feel like I've had more reflections on how that has impacted me today. I'm still not married, and I wanted to add more like lead magnet pages, more ways to contact me, a foreword by someone that is well known in my Catholic community, and just I made it a little bit bigger too. So now it has a spine. Before it was not big enough to have like my title written on the spine. So now it's like a little bit bigger print. So.
Oh, nice. A little easier to read for those of us who are a little bit older. So how does your book present a new perspective on singleness from maybe what we've seen in other books or from what we see online?
Yeah. Well, I have been a counselor, so I've heard a lot of people's stories, and I've also grown up to loving parents who have become best friends in their marriage. And I've heard so many people experience broken hearts in their relationship and not really knowing who they were prior to marriage or prior to a relationship, and therefore feel really lost and kind of abandoned in their own identity, that they don't feel like the same person and they don't really know themselves. So as a marriage counselor who is single, I've had a lot of time to reflect on how to love my singleness and how to really advocate for singles in the church, especially because I've gone to so many young adult groups, which are basically like mix and mingle groups, or, oh, we'll serve you when you're married, but good luck until then. And too, like being in your 30s and 40s and not feeling like there are the resources or the attention that others have in the church. Singles don't have that same sort of dialogue, that same voice, because the church really doesn't know what to do when someone is not in the silo or not in the box that they expect us to be in at a certain stage in our life. So I think it's just important to have a resource for singles to know that, you don't lose yourself when you get married. You give of yourself when you get married, but in order to give of yourself, you need to know who you are in your singleness so that you can introduce yourself to that person.
So let's talk a bit about this fact that, you're a marriage counselor, you're not married. What do you think that maybe does for you? Like, does it allow you an opportunity to provide a particular perspective? How does that work? Because of course, some people are going to go, well, how can you counsel people who are married?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And this book is used as kind of an answer to that question. If there are people who are saying, like, why would you be a marriage counselor? What would what do you know about love? Why would you counsel us? And so the book has actually become a good resource for me to kind of say, this is my answer. Because the book is really what I've learned about love as a single marriage counselor. And it's been really cool to see readers' insights, especially married people who are reminded that they are not defined by their marriage and that their life does not change. Your life changes because you step into your vocation in a different way, but you are still you. And I feel like so many couples need to be reminded of that because they forget about who they were prior to that. So when I go to marriage conferences or pre-marriage prep, I remind couples to not forget their singleness, to not forget that time of praying and waiting and wondering if God would ever have a spouse for them. And it's a really good reminder that I am actually very objective at this point in my life because I don't come from my own marital arguments prior to a session, when other marriage counselors may have a harder time keeping their own marriage kind of separate from the clients in front of us. So that has also been a helpful kind of piece of information for people, is they're like, oh yeah, that's true, that I'm just focused totally on them instead of telling them, oh, in my marriage I do this, because that's not really what counseling is. It's focused on their story and their needs.
Yeah, you don't want to project your relationship onto the relationship of the people you're working with. How do you see the audience for this book working out? Is it just for single people or with married people? Because like interestingly, my last Cath-Lit Live interview was with Rachel Bowman on her book about becoming wife, about entering into the vocation. So this is, and she also said her book isn't just for people who are getting married. It's also very encouraging to people who aren't sure exactly what their vocation is yet. So I'll kind of throw the same question to you. Who's your audience here? Yeah.
So as all authors know, you need to think of a avatar or kind of a reader while you're writing. You really want to focus on kind of a particular population or one person so that you can connect with many. If you try to connect with many, then you're not going to connect with anyone. So when I felt the call to write this book, I dedicated it to my ex at the time. Because I felt like he was similar to many men who kind of reach the point of engagement, but then don't take that step, or there's something in their own doubt or their own feeling of not being worthy of being loved or not being good enough And so I really focused on kind of young men, especially men in their 20s, who are just feeling like all I need is a girl, but then when I have a girl, then I don't, then I can't kind of make the move, or I can't, pop the question, and just them finding all their worth in the fact that they have a ring rather than who they are prior to that. So the focus was writing with him in mind, and also knowing that women typically like just about any book, while men have a much harder time, especially when it comes to relationships, to really pick up like a lovey-dovey, like dating advice book. And so I wanted this book to be very accessible to both men and women. And so I've thought of the cover. Another reason I updated the book is I picked a new cover based on the suggestions from men, because I'm at a lot of trade shows, and a lot of thought goes into what makes men pick up a book, or what makes it, attractive to them. Little did I know the color orange is very, very manly. I didn't know that before.
Well, it was Frank Sinatra's favorite color. He called it a happy color. So Frank Sinatra would approve if you put orange on your cover.
So yeah, it's for everyone. And yes, it's called Single Truth. But married men especially have loved it, because I think it's just a quick and easy read. You can read it in a day, or you can read little parts of it when you can, but it's for everyone. So don't be turned away by single truth. So the reason I named it Single Truth is that with faith, hope, and love, the greatest of these is love. And that's kind of the single truth. The single thing remains is love. So it's kind of a play on words.
All right. So if people want to find out more about you, and I know you've started a podcast recently too, where can we go to find about you, your book, your podcast? Where do we go?
Yeah. So I have two places. AnnieHarton.com is a good place to go to for anything kind of with my writing and kind of who I am as an individual and entrepreneur. And then youaremore.org is based on my practice, my coaching. So I do counseling, coaching, and run a business there. So both connect with each other, but youaremore.org and AnnieHarton.com. And then my podcast is called You Are More, and you can get that anywhere you get your podcasts. And then my book is available on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight, Annie.
Thank you.
And I hope people go and check out your book. I know I've got the original version on my bookshelf back here somewhere. So one of these days I'll have to get my hands on the new edition.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
We're going to wave goodbye to Annie. All right. So since the original version came out a few years ago, some of you may already have read the first edition. And if you want to go and leave a comment on Facebook or on YouTube if you've read it already, or maybe go check it out. Go check out her podcast. In fact, she had me on as a guest. And so that episode of her podcast, I think, will be releasing later this fall. So you can kind of find out what I think of some of her topics here by checking out the episode of You Are More, the podcast where Annie has me on as a guest. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'm just going to wish you all a happy reading.